Oh, welcome back. Well, Chapter 8. We're making our way through this course. This chapter, we're going to be talking about different forms of real estate ownership. How you can own your property, okay? So, yes, I'll guarantee you more definitions. You remember, repetition, okay? Let's talk about it. Forms of real estate ownership may be held three basic ways. 1, 2, 3. In severity, well, severity starts with an S, correct? That means you're the single owner of the property. You own it with nobody else. You own it in severity. So if you own the property all by yourself, nobody else went on the loan or on title with you, you own it in severity. Then we have co-ownership. That's when two or more individuals own property together. And then we'll be talking about a trust. That's a third individual holds title for the benefit of another party. So let's get the show on the road here. Told you about severity. One owner owns title to real estate. The owner has the sole rights for ownership. The owner has the sole discretion over the transfer of the ownership. You can sell to whoever you want. In Illinois, sole ownership of property is quite common, and title is held in severity, and it doesn't have any real big legal problems at all. It's all mine. Now, in Illinois, one thing you must be aware of, when either a husband or wife own a property in severity, so if you own a property before you get married, or you own a property in severity, lenders, grantees, and title insurers usually require the spouse to sign off on homestead rights. So if it's going to be in your name and your spouse is not going on the mortgage loan or anything, they're going to require your spouse to sign over the homestead rights. A non-owning spouse who is a minor will also have to sign, believe it or not. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. So severity, single owner. Co-ownership. Two or more individuals hold title to one parcel. It's also called concurrent ownership. Illinois does not recognize community property. That's what whatever was before the marriage is mine, whatever's after the marriage is ours. No. Illinois has what we call marital property. But what I say, in Illinois, it depends on how good of an attorney you have compared to how good of an attorney your spouse has. Okay? Talk to an attorney at that point in time. So let's talk about co-ownership first, the different types. There's more than one type of co-ownership, believe it or not. And our magic number is 3 in this course. There's almost 3 of everything. Plus, when you read your questions at the end, you should really read your questions 3 times. Why? Because many times when you read it once, you overlook certain words. And there's always distractors in questions that you have to be careful of. Don't let it distract you. You'll have the wrong answer. First co-ownership we're going to talk about is tenancy in common. In common. That means 2 or more individuals own a parcel of real estate. It could be a house, it could be an apartment, a condo, a factory, whatever. And each owner holds an undivided fractional interest. That doesn't mean, okay, you and I own this property in common. It doesn't mean we draw a line down the middle of the building. I have the side of the building that the washrooms are on. You have the other side. No. It's an undivided interest. Okay? Each owner holds an undivided fractional interest in the property. You have a unity of possession. You can possess the whole thing. You can take possession. You can use the living room. I can use the living room. Now, one thing I'm going to let you know, and things you should remember, in Illinois, if there's nothing in the deed that states how tenants in common, how your shares are held, it will always be equal. Another thing I'm going to tell you is tenants in common is the only type of co-ownership that can be unequal, where I can own 60% of the property, Bob can own 20% of the property, and Mary can own another 20% of the property. I can will my property, Mary can will hers, Bob can will his. They can be unequal. But if nothing is stated in Illinois, it's automatically equal. And if nothing is stated in the deed how co-ownership is owned, it's always in common. So you should know how properties are owned. Each tenant in common holds their co-ownership interest in severity. So Bob, Mary, and I all own this property in common. There's 3 of us. I can do with my interest what I want to do. I can sell my interest to Mary and Bob's worst enemy if I wanted to. Okay? If I die, I can will my interest to my daughters. But what if I die and I have no heirs and I have no will? Which means I died intestate, correct? So Roseanne, Bob, and Mary own this property as tenants in common. Roseanne dies. Now does Bob and Mary all own it? Well, Roseanne didn't have any heirs. She didn't have any will. Who gets Roseanne's interest? And I had 60% interest. Who's going to get my 60% interest? The county where the property is located in. So if you own property in common and you know the other owner has no heirs, you may want to make sure they have a will so somebody besides the county will get the property if something happens to them. So that's tenants in common. You have something in common, but you can do with it what you want to do. So here's our chart. A and B, tenants in common. A owns a half, B owns a half. B dies and wills his interest to C and D. So A still owns a half, but C gets a quarter, D gets a quarter, because it was not stated how that was going to be divided. Now we're talking about joint tenancy. They're joined together. 2 or more owners are joined together as one. Easy way I can describe this to you. And I thought of this in the middle of my sleep one time. Just think of Siamese twins, Siamese triplets. They're born together at the same time, joined together. Well, joint tenancy has to be created at the same time with the same document, etc., etc. So if you have A, B, C, and D are all joined together, they will always, always have equal ownership. Where tenants in common, they can have unequal. So you have A, B, C, and D, all will own 25, 25, 25, 25%. Now if A dies, then joint tenancy has right of survivorship. So B, C, and D own 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Okay, the right of survivorship cannot pass to any co-owner heirs. Now, B dies. C and D are still joined, so it's 50-50, correct? Right? Everybody follow me? Now C dies. They're slowly getting killed off. You notice that? So C dies. Well, D owns it how? In severity. D is the single owner. He owns 100%. Now D now can leave a will, leaving everything to his family, correct? But if D died first and left a will, leaving all his real and personal property to his family, and he died, it wouldn't matter when it came to his real property he owned as a joint tenant. A, B, and C would still be ownership equal, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Joint tenancy must be created at the same time with 4 unities. Unity of possession, of interest, of time, and the same title, all by the same document. That must be happening. Now you look at the chart. You have A, B, C, and D are all joined. 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. A dies. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. B dies. 1/2, 1/2. C dies. D owns 100%. D owns in severity. Okay, D dies. He can pass to any heirs. He can leave a will. But before we go to our next one, I want to talk about joint tenants again. Let's go to A, B, C, owning it. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, okay? And let's see if I can do it after the fact. So this is X. X comes in after the fact. X was not created with the same document, correct? His interest to X, so X has C's 1/3 in common with A and B. Understand that a little bit better? Now B dies. So A acquires B's interest. So A basically has 2/3 interest in the property in common with C. So that's our tenancy in common. That's our joint tenancy. Tell you, I go, just like you when you get tired in that, that's joint tenancy. They're joined together till another time. Another type of co-ownership we're going to talk about, it's recognized in Illinois. You must be married for this one to exist. Spouses. Each spouse has equal undivided interest in the property with the right of survivorship. Upon the death of one spouse, well, you're no longer married, are you? Then the owner becomes sole owner. Upon divorce, you're no longer married. Can you own a tenant by the entirety? No. Either one person will own it, or then they'll own a tenants in common. Everything gets redone talk to an attorney. Okay? But divorce will terminate it, death will terminate it. Tenants by the entirety, they must be married. And we have a trust. A trust is a device by which one person, and throughout this course, you're going to have a lot of OR words, a lot of EE words. Well, the OR is the owner or the creator of the document or the owner of the property. So a trust is a device by which one person, which is the trustor, the creator, transfers ownership of a property to someone else, a trustee, to hold and manage for the benefit of a third party, which is the beneficiary. And many times, sometimes the beneficiary is also the trustor. So take a land trust in Illinois. You have your property in a land trust, okay? You create this land trust. You are known as the trustor. You give it to Bank of America to hold. They are the trustee for the benefit of a third party, maybe your children. The third party is the beneficiary. That's how it works. So a couple memory tips on the OR and EE's words. Another way of ownership is by business organizations. You should be familiar with these. You will see them down the road later on too sometimes. You have partnerships. That's an association of two or more individuals who carry out a business for profit. It's co-owners. It's called a partnership. That's what it's called, a partnership. And there's different types of partnerships. You have a general partnership. That's where all the partners participate in the operation and management of the business. But you all share full liability for business losses and obligation. One thing, though, with the general partnership, if one partner dies or withdraws or goes bankrupt, we have to dissolve this entire partnership and we must reorganize everything. So that could be a headache, too. Then you have a limited partnership. That's limited. It's run by the general partner or partners, with limited partners who are not legally permitted to participate day-to-day management. But the limited partners can be held liable for business losses up to the extent of their investment. You have nothing to say about how the business is run as a limited partner, but you invested $50,000, you're liable up to that $50,000, even though you have no say-so. And again, if somebody dies, then it's going to have to be dissolved and reorganized. Then we talk about a corporation. Corporation, you hear of a lot of corporations. AHI, Real Estate and Insurance Services Incorporated, Accredited Home Study Institute Incorporated. We're a corporation. We're a legal entity. And when we own property, if AHI was to own property, a corporation is an artificial person. We would own it in severity. Like a co-op owning that whole building that you get a perpetuitary lease. The co-op owns it in severity. The shareholders of the corporation do not have direct ownership interest, but they basically own stock in the corporation. Shareholders' liability for the corporate losses is limited to the amount of the individual's investment. That's it. The corporation will exist until it's formally dissolved. If one party dies, well, they may get another shareholder, but death of one of the officers or directors will not affect title to the property owned by the corporation. Corporation owns it in severity. That's what they do. Then you'll run into sometimes syndicates and joint ventures. Should be familiar with those names. You may run across them. Syndicates, joint ventures, well, two or more people or firms join together to make and operate a real estate investment. It is not a legal entity. It may take a variety of ownership forms. It's characterized by the time limitations resulting from the fact that the joint ventures do not intend to establish a permanent relation. It's not permanent. Not as good. And today, a lot of times you see limited liability companies, LLCs. It's combined, it's the most attractive features of limited partnerships and corporations. Members enjoy limited liability of corporations and tax advantages of partnerships. At that point in time, whether you want to form a corporation, limited liability company, whatever for a business, who do you talk to? An attorney and an accountant. Other types of home ownership, we talked about co-ownership. Now we're going to talk about condominiums, cooperatives, townhomes, and timeshares. Condominium ownership, each unit owner holds a fee simple title to the unit. They usually own from the paint on in. And they own a specified share of the undivided interest of the common elements. So you own a condominium in this complex that has a swimming pool, tennis court, etc. And it's you and your wife, you're joint tenants, let's say, in this property. You own your property as joint tenants. But the common elements, the hallways, the elevators, the swimming pool, you own in common with all the other owners. Okay? Creation of condominiums in the state of Illinois is governed by our Illinois Condominium Property Act. Everything is governed by some law or other. Ownership, each unit is a separate parcel of real estate. It's owned in fee simple. It can be held as tenants by the entirety if the owners are married. Each property, each condo is assessed for taxes. They're going to collect taxes on every single unit. If the owner defaults on their mortgage payment, it will not affect the other unit owners. They will get foreclosed on, the other unit owners will not. Now, when we talk about co-op ownership, that's when a corporation owns the property, holds title to the land. And the buyer, you the buyer, become a shareholder in the corporation, which is only personal property. You receive a proprietary lease for the life of the corporation. Until you sell it, you can sell your lease to somebody else. But stock is personal property, so the cooperative tenant owners do not own real estate. One thing I want you to be aware of, though, if we all own property in this cooperative, we all pay one fee to the corporation. Now, if I don't make my payment to the corporation, what's going to happen to all you other owners? Unlike a condominium, nothing. Well, in a co-op, you all have to pay my portion I didn't pay. So I think I like condominium ownership a little bit better. Township ownership, townhouse ownership, most townhomes basically are PUDs. We talked about PUDs before. Title of each unit and lot, because in a townhome, legal townhome, you own the lot down to the center of the earth and up to infinity. And you have a fractional interest in common areas. There are some townhomes, though, they look like townhomes, but they are condominiums, but appear to be townhomes. Common areas are open space, facilities, driveways, parking lots, elevators. That's common areas. Then we're going to talk about timeshare ownership. Timeshare ownership. It permits multiple purchasers to buy interest in real estate, usually resort property, vacation property. You receive the right to use the facility for a certain period of time. The right to use. If it's the right to use, it's not a fee simple interest. If you have interest in the property, then it's timeshare estate. You can have both, timeshare ownership or timeshare estate. If it's the right to use, it's only ownership. It's the right to use it. If you have an interest in it, watch how questions are worded, it would be a timeshare estate. Okay? And that will wrap up our Chapter 8 here, and hopefully you'll understand things a little bit better. And good luck at doing your questions at the end of the chapters. And we'll be talking to you very shortly.